sometimes you need to, but like
Yes,
it's
I
like when
think
somebody is like throwing stones at you or like trying to kill you, okay, take that shit seriously. But like if something happened 5,000 years ago, but you want to say that they were Aryans or this or that, you're getting unnecessarily angry about it. What is this?
that's
That I
true.
don't understand.
I think we all are emotional beings, and that's, I
Yeah.
think, somewhere part of the problem, because when we believe in something, we don't need
Hmm.
logics. We don't accept logics in faith. Also, that's the problem with faith, as a lot of scholars have pointed out. And when it's favorable to us, we are happy to accept whatever is there about anything. But
Yeah.
whenever you write or you research something contrary to the faith or the larger belief, people really get agitated. So when Mughals are I think, the first-hand receivers of the torture for many, many years, or should we say centuries, because now we like to talk about long durays. Whenever we talk of Indian history, we think, centuries old, this old, whatever,
Yeah.
and we generally don't get into the details. It's always up in the air. Nobody wants to discuss them. Nobody wants to write about them. There is some sense of escapism in all forms of writings, uh, because people really don't want to challenge a lot of the mainstream beliefs.
Yeah.
With that explosive statement, people, welcome to YouTube, Caravans, Instagram, and other social media platform followers. Thank you for so much for tuning in. My name is Ishan, and this was just a trailer for all of you, unedited. We might touch upon these things in our conversation today with Nikhil Gulati and Ashwitha Jayakumar, the writer and illustrator of a book called The Book of Emperors, an illustrated history of the Mughals. Yes, the Mughals. Somebody just mentioned this morning on our Instagram account that why are you glorifying Mughals? Why are you writing? Why are you talking about the Mughals? I think even if we are not glorifying or we are glorifying, we don't know what do they mean about glorifying. We cannot simply just remove about 250 plus years of history, whether good or bad. That's up for discussions. But you simply cannot escape the Mughals. Whatever you are eating today, be it the chilies or the tomatoes or the potatoes or anything that you wear, somewhere or the other there is a Mughal contribution to that, which is uncomfortable to accept. But yes, they were ruling when all these things came about to India, Portuguese and others. So, Ashwata, Nikhil, welcome to this conversation. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this. We were planning this for a very, very, very long time. In between, Nikhil and Ashwita have done many, many heritage walks and many, 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 many book talks. But there was some buffer time between this session and the next book that they are writing. So we decided that we'll do this on 23rd December. And so my first question is very basic. When did you read about the Mughals first? The school days. And what did you remember? What do you remember of those school days, history, classrooms?
You want to go first?
I don't remember the history class books, the textbooks actually. What I remember are visiting places. I have a very, very early memory where it's a garden and there's like a sloping thing where water is like flowing down and it has this like a pattern carved in the stone over which the water is flowing. So it's making this very soft, like trinkling kind of a sound. And there's trees and there's a lot of people sitting in the gardens. And I remember being there with my parents. I had no idea it's a Mughal garden. I just remember it being like such a beautiful place that I have it in my head till today. And then at a later point, somewhere it got connected that that was once we were at a Mughal gardens. My parents were talking about it, and I was like, wait, I have this memory. They were like, yeah, yeah, that's where it was with that fountain and all this. So I don't remember the textbooks, to be honest. I remember like the Taj, for example, visiting as a kid and being blown away, or the Humayun's tomb from some school trip. So yeah, those
Yeah,
are
I
my.
think Taj was also my first introduction to the Mughals. I don't remember, and my school days were not too long ago. I was just there in school
Yeah.
yesterday.
Maybe that's why I don't remember much. It was a long time ago.
But yes, Ashwita, what about you?
I have to say, I think the first introduction to the Mughals for me was probably like Akbar Birbal folktales.
Hmm.
And that's
That
pretty much
also,
it.
yeah.
Like, I didn't know much about them. I remember going to Humayun's tomb when I was like 11 or 12, and the Taj when I was 10. And sure, very impressive buildings, and they stuck in my head for a long time, but I never really connected them to, you know how in school you have to do Mughal history, which I remember doing, but it was very basic, and I only remember them talking about Akbar and Dini Ilahi and how he was a great and tolerant king for his period, and that's about it. I never really connected them to anything else. It was very keywordy, like, what did Akbar invent? The Mansabdari system. Like, you had to just
Hmm.
know the multiple choice answer, and that was it. Who built the Taj Mahal? Shah Jahan. That's it. So there was never really any like, oh, these were the Mughals or they're being glorified. In fact, it was pretty dry and boring. I really knew nothing about them from my school textbook.
I think that's the problem with the school textbook that these are so uh, not so glamorous that you remember things, and that gap which existed during my school days have been filled by books like yours and Nikhil's your People of the Indus, because these books really help give young people, not just young people, actually anybody, an introduction to complex histories. History is not unipolar or unidimensional. There are different layers, and when we read books written by great scholars, wonderful researchers, they may write it from a vantage that the readers might know a little bit about the theme beforehand, and that has really made a that I think is a problem when people say, when a lot of big writers say that Indian historians have failed to address the public. The problem is not that they are not accessible, it is that they think sometimes that the reader might know a little something about the theme already. So when you were writing, what kind of research that you did? What books did you read? And then how did you simplify them? And during the process of simplification, I think you also might have to keep in check that you are not simplifying the narratives. You're just making the language easy for a larger audience. You're not oversimplifying different, very complex issues.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the biggest challenges of writing a book like this, because on the one hand, you don't want to make it all about black and white narratives, right? Like, that's exactly what we are pushing back against. I don't think it is valuable or intelligent to go back in time and say, oh, this person was a bad person or this person was a good person. In fact, a lot of kids ask me that question, and some adults. They want to know if the Mughals were bad or if they were good. And I have to always try and explain, well, are you a bad person or a good person? Like, can you categorize yourself definitively as a bad person or a good person? Have you never, ever, ever done anything bad in your life? Like, thought a bad thought or been mean to a friend? And then usually they're like, oh, well, yeah, I have done those things. And so when you extrapolate from there and say, well, can anybody truly be only bad or only good? And then you get people to think about the fact that all people in history, even the greatest people we want to hold up as heroes or the people we want to denigrate as villains, they're all human beings, and they're all people who are reacting to their particular circumstances and situations. And
Yeah.
just like we might make bad decisions, they make bad decisions too. But in terms of the, like, I wanted to just say that the thing that spurred this book into existence was really just the fact that when, like what we were talking about with to do with the lack of narrative in textbooks, the lack of this humanization of people in the past, that was the catalyst for something like this coming to exist. It's the idea that I grew up reading lots and lots of history. I never really read Indian history because I didn't have good books on Indian history that were written for a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old or a 14-year-old. I was reading stuff that was written about Britain or Europe, because there was so much, and there still is so much that's written about even like
Yeah.
a dynasty, like the Tudors. There's so
Yeah.
many
Yeah.
interesting things from history books to historical fiction that are ways of understanding these people in the past. And in India, it feels like I didn't grow up with that. I didn't have things that were interesting enough to pull me in. And it's exactly what you're saying. It's this assumption that I should already know what a certain period is called. I should already know who, when the Guptas ruled. I should already know these things. And if you're whether you're a 10-year-old or you're a 30-year-old who's coming to it, you might not. And if a book is going to start off by making you feel a little bit ignorant, you're less likely to accept it. You're less likely to give it the time of day, right? So I think that was a very big part of how we went about making this book, that it should never at any point make a reader, no matter the age, feel ignorant. Because the thing about history is you need context. You need to know what a certain thing meant to someone. So whether you're writing about the freedom movement, which is a thing I've done, or writing about this period in history, the Mughal period, you need people to understand what the stakes were at that time. What was somebody's life like? What was the average lifespan of a person? What did they eat? What did they wear? All of these things that make up that world, that's something you can't take for granted, no matter how old your target reader is.
Uh, I think that's very true, and that you mentioned about the European history, world history bit. I remember this book series that I read when I was a kid. I should not say when I was a young person, considering that might be contradictory to the facts. But this book called The Horrible Histories, the series of books
Yeah,
which had terrible
I love those.
Tudors and so many other interesting pretexts to that book. And those kind of series didn't exist in Indian scenario. We had Amar Chitra Katha, which was a very different league
Yeah.
of books, which were not academic. They were story books, but brilliantly illustrated. I loved those Amar Chitra Katha illustrations. And talking about illustration, I think Nikhil should come in here, because this book is also richly illustrated. If you see from the chapter of Babur, or before Babur, actually, before the Mughals, the story of illustration starts in the book, and it ends with the last page of the story. So, Nikhil, how difficult or how easy was it for you to illustrate this book? We also have the Mughal paintings as reference points when a lot of us discuss Mughal histories. What were your reference points when you were illustrating the book?
Um, how easy or difficult, I'm not sure, but it was really fun for sure. Because there is so much rich material available. There's literally thousands of paintings,
Uh,
maybe hundreds. I don't know. I don't know if it's more than 1,000, but literally like hundreds and hundreds. And and it's really fun because each emperor had a different flavor of paintings, because and that so it was easy in the sense that there was a lot available to draw upon. And because we are representing the Mughal period, then the art and that style of art is itself part of the history, like the way an artist in that time period shows, let's say, a building and people and the perspective and the landscape, that is part of the history itself. So we wanted to capture some of that style, but at the same time, the challenge is that the art was solely funded by the emperor. So it is literally propaganda. It is literally what the emperor wants you to think and what they want to record. What they don't want to record is not there. how they want to portray a certain thing, who paints it, how many artists get paid for it, etc., is all dependent on the person who's funding it all. So to talk about history, we don't just take those sources at face value, right? Like what somebody said 500 years ago, we don't just believe what they say. Like you have to think about, okay, who was saying this? Who were they saying it to? Why were
Yeah.
they saying it? If they talk about a certain event that happened, let's say in Akbar's life, Akbar Nama is his own, like his history is there, which records certain events that happen in his life. Like, are we able to corroborate it from other sources? Did somebody else write about it in that same time period? There was a secret history written in the time of Akbar, which was written by a guy who was very critical of Akbar. So it's really nice to refer to that because, but then again, you have to think about what was that person's agenda, etc. So that was the challenging part with the art, because every emperor has their own tastes, their own styles, or whatever. So we wanted to represent the art in that style, but at the same time reinterpret it and show the world in a more nuanced way and in a more, I don't know, in a more historical way, you know.
Hmm.
So so it was fun overall. Like I don't know. I just I had liked Mughal paintings from a long time ago, especially this Jahangir's time period. There are these paintings, very richly detailed paintings of animals and plants and birds and stuff, which Jahangir was really fond of. So he made some of his artists record that stuff. And one famous artist is Mansoor, whose paintings I remember liking from a long time ago. Um, but I hadn't really gone deep into the art styles and all the paintings, etc. So it was a great opportunity for me to look through it with a more, uh,
Hmm.
observant and keen eye and study, like, okay, what is even happening here? Oh, there's this person in this. Oh, Akbar is running on these elephants across a bridge. Oh, but this is a
Hmm.
bridge of
Hmm.
boats. Oh, that's why it's wobbly. Like, to look at it in so much detail was really fun. And then, yeah.
And what was your reaction, Ashwita, when you first saw the illustrations? Or were you also part of the planning? Were you in touch with Nikhil?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
very
one
much.
of the things about this book that was so much fun to do, which is that unlike a lot of illustrated books, we really worked on every page together. You know, there would be discussions about every piece of art, but also about every sentence that is written. Because Nikhil's also a writer. So it's not like, I mean, obviously, I can't draw to save my life, but I have opinions about drawing. So we definitely shared a lot of like there was a lot of back and forth on how do we show each emperor. So one of the things that we decided early on, originally when we first thought of the book, was, oh, we'll start every emperor's biography with a portrait. And originally we had thought, oh, we'll just do a regular portrait, you know, like we'll copy one of the portraits, or we'll do make a few tweaks. And then it became,
Yeah.
why don't we use the portrait as a chapter opener? Why don't we have the portrait represent thematically one thing about this emperor? And and it's the case with every emperor chapter, that even the writing, it focuses on one particular aspect of them. So if it's Akbar, it's his daring, intellectually, physically, all of these things in his life point to him being someone who took a lot of risks. So how do we show that? Or if it's a Humayun, we know that he's someone who got distracted a lot, or tended to be overwhelmed by the stimulus around him, whether it was women or wine or the stars or his son, like whatever was in front of him, he got absolutely obsessed with. So we again thought, how do we encapsulate this quality of this person that we're trying to talk about in a piece of art? And so that part, I think, was the most fun for me, because it meant us kind of zeroing in on what's the theme of this chapter. Who is this emperor that we're going to talk about? What is this one quality we're focusing on, and this theme that we're using to link everything together? and how do we encapsulate that in the art as well. So I really love how every portrait, when you turn to that particular page, you might not know what's coming up next, but the portrait gives you a little clue about what the chapter is going to tell you.
Actually, I just remember the first portrait that you have in the book is that Paradise Garden, or the so-called Mughal Char Bagh Gardens. And I was just having a conversation with Sopan Joshi, the Hindi journalist, the very famous journalist, who has just written a book on it's the biography of the mangoes, Magnifera
Right.
indica. And he was mentioning, and I would like to know your comments also, that India never had the garden culture. India always had forest cultures. We come from a culture which had forests, Aranyak. But Mughals came from a place where it was the horticulture highland or something, which is between two great horticulture centers. And there you had a lot of gardens, a lot of polished fruits came from those gardens, like oranges or mangoes, which was not so here in India. India still had a very different set of fruits, different sets of understanding. So, what do you think of the Paradise Garden? What do you think of this gardening culture, which I think is there everywhere? Every house has a garden now in India.
Yeah. It's an interesting question, right? Because the long held idea was that the charbagh comes from the Persian culture. It comes from this concept of recreating paradise on earth. And I think, at least for Babur, I can speak to it being partly him wanting to emulate Timur and do what he did in Samarkand, which is to build a whole bunch of gardens, but also to tame the landscape that he was in. It was his way of creating a space for himself in this place that was now his home. Because there's this sense of, he comes to Agra, and in his Babarnama he writes that it's hot and it's dusty, and he's got this really famous rant about how he hates everything around him except for the lovely shiny gold and silver and the mangoes, coincidentally. But he's so whiny about everything around him, and then one of the first things he does is to plan a garden,
Yeah.
because that's what he wants. He's trying to, and to me it's very much the action of someone who's deeply homesick. And it's very similar to the way that, say, if you're a diasporic Indian, you move abroad and then the first thing you do is really embrace your culture, the way that you might not have if you continue to live in India. So for me, as like a Tamil person living in Delhi, I move here and suddenly I'm very into watching Tamil movies and eating Tamil food, all the stuff that I never did as a child. Suddenly it is my connection to my homeland. And so to me, that little thing of him immediately wanting to build a garden, it's to try and make himself feel at home in a place that he is now migrated to. And I love that. And that grows into the garden tombs. It grows into them building these gardens all over the empire, and putting their stamp on the world that they came to occupy. And I think it's very beautiful.
Which is your favorite garden, Nikhil? Where do you go often?
Where do I go often? Oh, uh, I go to my terrace the most often.
Do
That's
you have
my
a small
favorite
garden
garden.
there?
No, there's just a couple of pots and some plants. That's
Baba would be so angry to hear this.
it.
Oh,
Yeah, but it's okay. There's a forest in front of my window, so it's all good.
Lucky you.
yeah, that's what you want. Forest view.
Yeah, I don't want to block it with some plants and all.
You are the
It's
true Indian.
important.
You are truly Indian.
And in fact, there's a lot of mango trees around here.
Very nice.
Literally, like every third or fourth tree is a mango tree, and they're all
Nice.
varieties, all kinds.
I
But
feel
you
like
come from a
Babar would really
place.
judge me because I kill plants. I have never managed to keep a plant alive for more than a few weeks. Somehow or the other, they die. Either I overwater or underwater. And so now we have plants on our balcony, and I've given responsibility over them to my husband. And I'm like, don't let me near them. Just please, they are yours. Do not let me come near these plants.
No, I think it's we really need वो आजकल तो वो आने लगे हैं. You can put them, you don't have to water them every day. You just put them in
Yeah.
your room. and they grow on their own somehow or the other. I don't know how do they do that, but they're becoming self-sufficient, I assume, because they don't believe in humans anymore. So nothing against you, Ashwita, but they think, I think it's their change of thoughts maybe.
Oh, good.
But but
I coming back
huh,
to the Mughal gardens you were asking, I really like the ones in Srinagar
the
because
Shalimar Garden,
Shalimar Bagh, and there's another one,
was it the Mehtab Bagh?
Mehtab Bagh, yes.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so those are the really beautiful ones, but I don't visit them every day, of course, because we have some modern day conflicts going on over there.
Oh, I've never been.
Um,
I would love to go. All the pictures I've ever seen are beautiful.
We should all
yeah,
actually plan a trip to Kashmir and visit the beautiful places. I know a lot of historians do organize those trips, so I think people should actually go visit.
yeah,
Uh,
and over there, their idea of a garden, like a real pa- paradise, the idea of paradise is basically mountains, garden, and water, and that's the only
Yeah.
place where this configuration is there in in those gardens in Kashmir.
yeah.
Um,
Was it also because from where they are coming, these landscapes were rare to find, and this was something they always wanted. What they believed that the paradise would look like.
I thought, I'm not sure actually what the origins are, but like Babur is from Fargana, which is a valley and
Yeah.
surrounded by
Yeah.
mountains. Uh, and it is a place which is it's not as lush and green like India. Like it is green, but it's not like dense forested tropical kind of environment. So a more garden-like environment like might be more natural there, like there are these grassy whatever landscapes, even though Mughal gardens were not like lawns or anything, which is a misconception sometimes, that the lawns are basically a European
A
idea of
British
garden.
invention. Yeah.
Yeah, and Mughal gardens had a lot of trees, fruit trees, flowering trees, and herbs and stuff like that, and water channels. Um so anyway, so I don't know where this idea comes from, but
In
uh,
the Shalimar Garden, there is a plaque which says "Gar Firdaus Badru Zaminas Thaminas Thaminas Thaminas," which is, if there's paradise on earth, it is
Yeah.
here. Yeah.
It's
But
also on the Red
interestingly,
Fort, right?
yes, I just found out through a through an Instagram reel by Sohail Hashmi, where he says that it is also in the Red Fort and
Yeah.
any other places where the Mughals built, because they believed that wherever they are and wherever they build something grand, it was like a paradise. It was the best of the art form. So it's an interesting thought. Where is the paradise? It's everywhere. Wherever the Mughals went, would you agree to that idea?
I definitely think they like to make things beautiful. And I think I often wonder why we don't have that aesthetic sensibility anymore. And I don't, it's not just the Mughals, right? Like if you in any part of India you go to, historical spaces and historical architecture is so beautiful and so functional. It keeps you cool in hot places like in South India. But we don't have that anymore, and we've adopted this horrible glass and steel, I don't know, Manhattan skyline kind of aesthetic now. And it's so, I personally find it very ugly. I would even go back to like the sort of brutalist, post independence India structures. I prefer, like, there's something there that's even better than these glass and steel, like, soulless monstrosities to me.
What
yeah.
about you, Nikhil?
What about me? What's the question?
Wha- do you agree with the idea of paradise, that wherever the Mughals went, they built a
Oh,
paradise?
I like the attitude. Yeah, I like the attitude that where you are is paradise uh because why not, right? Like, I mean,
Hmm.
I don't know if I don't think all the Mughals embodied this idea. Baba definitely did not. He hated India. But at least as a value to aspire to, I like it, you know, as like as a value that inspires you to perhaps change where you are and like make it nicer,
Hmm.
and also be
Yeah.
more accepting of what it is and make the best of it. So I like it as an attitude. I don't know if wherever they went was paradise or is paradise. Yeah.
But if you have to compare it with your first work, the people of the Indus, how do you compare Indus Valley with the Shalimar Garden or with whatever the Mughals built much later? Is it even
Um,
comparable?
it's like comparing a dream that you had a month ago, which you only vaguely remember, versus a dream that you had a week ago, which you also vaguely remember but a little bit less vaguely. Because to me, history is really like that. Like
Yeah,
it's most of it is lost, and reality as it is today has always been extremely excruciatingly complex, right? And for us to look back and be like to try and imagine what Mohenjo-daro looked like, for example, in its heyday.
yeah,
Heyday itself is a quote unquote, it's a make believe idea. What is heyday? What does that even mean? When it's the biggest, when it's the nicest, when the people are the happiest? How do you even measure that for something like 5,000 years ago? You don't even know what it actually looked like. You can only imagine, you know. So, and to then put it in a book, which is let's say 50, 60,000, I don't know how many thousands, 80,000 words. I don't know how long this book is. In 80,000 words, you're not going to capture or encapsulate everything that
yeah,
happened, for a period of 250 years. So I don't know, it's hard to say, but the fun of it is in imagining. And I think like trying to imagine what life was like in the Indus Valley cities, where we clearly know certain things, where we don't know most things, but we know
yeah,
a few things. Like, for example, the absence of warfare for such a long time is such a it is such a wild idea that a
correct.
society can live like that. And but really, if you wanted to question it, you could question like, was there no oppression? Well, I don't know. There probably was. To what degree was there oppression? We don't really know. What kind of oppression? Was it economic oppression? We might not have metal swords or stuff like that, but what if people were really good with bamboo sticks in beating people up? So so that's the thing. Like, you can only know some things, and based on that you try and imagine. And the beauty and the magic of a history to me is that we keep the one thing that we keep finding over and over is that the people who made up these time periods and these cities and these societies and these cultures were no different from us.
Yeah,
Really, like in essence, they were
Yeah.
exactly the same. They were smart, they were also dumb. They were creative, they were also just very traditional, copy paste. They were sometimes generous and helpful, and sometimes they were very selfish and cruel. And this pattern we keep seeing over and over and over again, and that I think doesn't change from an Indus Valley to the Mughal times to the present day.
Yeah.
So that's how I kind of look at these two things. But if we were to compare, the Indus Valley was black and white, the Mughals is colored, and that's kind of how the history is too. The Mughals come to us in a lot more detail. We know
yeah,
the stories, we have their autobiographies, we have their letters, we have their farmans,
Yeah.
we have people writing and saying things that have survived till today from the Mughal period. So we can tell kind of in some places what say Aurangzeb was thinking at a particular time when he wrote a certain letter. Sadly, in the Indus Valley, that kind of high definition detail is long lost. We don't know what people were thinking. We don't know what their names were even. We
mm,
don't know what they even called their cities. We call them Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, but we don't know what they called them back then. So in that sense, the Mughals have come to us in a little more high definition detail, but still, a lot of it is gone.
I agree. And you mentioned that Indus was black and white, and Mughals were more colorful, as in they were more interesting, and because also it's after a long passage of time and lot of development
Mhm.
had already was done. Uh, they also came up with a lot of great smells and foods. I think that's also part of the book.
The
the
Mughals.
food, feasting like the Mughals. So, Ashwita, how did you write the chapter? What kind of food did you taste? Or also, do you also agree with the idea of the Mughlai food, which also goes on whenever I go to the Sarvajanin Kali Puja Samiti at my near my place, they always have the Mughlai food counter, which
Yeah.
would give you Mughlai paratha, Mughlai anda, Mughlai whatever, all sorts of Mughlai things.
That particular chapter, I remember having to cut down a lot because there is a lot of detailed information about the kind of food that the emperors ate, the kind of different quirks that they had. Like, I didn't know that Akbar used to order his water brought straight from the Ganga because he really believed that Ganga Jal was the only thing you should drink. Or that Jahangir developed this great fondness for khichdi after he went to Gujarat because he, as someone who used drugs and alcohol copiously, probably had a lot of stomach trouble. And so, yeah, he writes in his diary about how, oh, I discovered this wonderful porridge called khichdi and I'm going to get my cooks to make it. So there's like food seemed to be an incredibly important part of their lives, and like there was so much ceremony surrounding food. But it's also like I find the very human stuff more interesting. So whether it's someone, like Babur was early on in his, as he had come to India, there was a poisoning attempt on an attempt made on his life by Ibrahim Lodi's mother, and then that I think like changes your relationship with food a little, where you start seeing it as suspicious, right? Or
Correct.
there's also this incredible like fondness for fruit, which
Hmm.
I, in my life, don't like fruit at all. So the way that they rhapsodize about the grapes and the melons, and oh my goodness, they brought this melon from Kabul and I eat it and I cry. That degree to which there's this love of fruit is very interesting to me. And it seems very different from like other early modern cultures that I have studied, like because I studied British and European history, and it seems like there's so much emphasis on meat and smoked meats and breads and cheeses, and here it's all about the fresh food. So I found that like a very interesting contrast, that they were very healthy.
We also have a culinary expert, a historian who has worked on the Mughal food, Neha in the chat, Neha Virmani. Hi, Neha, welcome to the chat. You can ask your questions in the chat box. But, I also want to ask because when you were writing, I'm sure because I love food, as is very evident, but uh, when you were writing this, were you also tasting some good food? Did you also go to Purani Delhi or Zakir Nagar to try some good nihari and
I didn't
biryani?
taste a whole lot. I mean, I live in Delhi, so I get access to a lot of Mughlai food year round. But there are some things in the book, like this particular stew called an ash, which I've never tried and I've never even seen on the menu of any restaurants here, which I would be interested in trying. And I love that there are now these translated cookbooks. So I got the
Yeah.
one that's got recipes apparently used in Shah Jahan's kitchen, and there's a new one by the same writer
Salma
on,
Hussain, yes.
yeah, on
Salma
Jahangir's
Yusuf
kitchen.
Hussain, yes.
So I really want to get my hands on the Jahangir one because I leafed through it at a store, and it's like the first thing I opened on was a dish of eggplants and eggs, which sounds fantastic because I love both. So, but you never hear about those kinds of dishes, right? We just keep eating the same butter chicken and I don't know, chicken changezi, which I don't know if it has anything to do with Genghis Khan at all. But there's so many different, like as you say, Mughlai foods. I would be interested in doing a comparison of dishes that we eat now and the recipes that are in these books, and see how far do we actually use the same ingredients.
I feel like so much must have changed. So much must have changed since then. Like the taste of tomatoes, for example.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty sure it's not the same variety of tomatoes we're eating today that they were. Or, like I was reading somewhere that fruits are getting sweeter like over
Correct.
time because we are picking those varieties that are sweeter, and so they're selling more. So people are planting more of
Oh,
those. So they're getting sweeter because there's so much sweet in our diet generally. Now we are not going to have some fruit that doesn't taste sweet because then we're like, oh, what
right.
tastes like
Sugar
anything.
has ruined us.
Yeah, but like 300, 400 years back when that wasn't the case, things would have been different. Like even in my own lifetime, I've seen that the taste of, for example, the bhuttas have changed because the varieties that are being planted are completely different, etc. So I kind of wonder, but I like that. I think the like a lot of the recipes and the methods I think have survived.
Yeah.
Probably modified somewhat, but like still, like the essence of it is probably there, like nihari, etc. have preserved
Biryani.
that. Yeah,
Although
biryani.
biryani apparently is the source of great debate, there's a lot of discussion over whether it did originate in Mughal army camps or did it originate elsewhere. So I'm very interested in this.
Yeah, this
Like,
is such
where did
a
biryani come from? And then there's all lots of opinions about which is true biryani and which isn't.
yeah.
Does the Kolkata biryani with an aloo in it, is that really biryani or
No,
not?
no, it's
So
not. I'm telling you the word. It is
I
not.
feel like this whole
निखिल ने
conversation will
बिगुल
be
बजा दिया
hijacked
है
if we go down that
revolution
path.
का.
Yeah.
Because there's
See,
another
I've grown up
question
in
asked.
Delhi, so Delhi is as Mughal as it gets, right? So
Yeah. No, but
Agra
we
also.
also, interestingly, because you mentioned an interesting thing, Ashwita, in your answer, that they had khichdi more than we can imagine,
Yeah,
in their food. They were vegetarians because they had gastric problems all throughout genealogies, since Babur or maybe
Yeah.
before him,
Way
till
before this, lentils, rice, etc., millets, all this is there even in Harappan kitchens. So
correct,
yeah.
pretty
And
sure they were
eggplants.
making khichdi.
correct.
Yeah.
So हम जब कहते हैं we always limit Mughal food to non-vegetarian food, which I think is unjust. And they had a lot of khichiris and also different kinds of khichiris, not just the dal khichiri that we are used to eating,
Hmm.
that green dal khichiri that we eat
Yeah.
whenever we are sick. But there are different kinds of khichiris and also different kinds of biryani, including the veg biryani.
Yeah.
If you read Salma Appa's book, she mentions sabze biryan and sabze
Yeah.
biryani paneer and so on and so forth.
Hmm.
Interesting. And when we are saying this veg biryani, people, it really exists. Veg biryani is a thing, as is also corroborated by a friend, Sanjay Hegde, who I think we all run the veg biryani appreciation club because
If you know,
it's
this is such a crucial point here. Like, where does
yeah,
biryani come from? I mean, it
uh,
sounds like such a basic question, but if you start looking at every word of this sentence, you can like pick it to bits. Where? Okay, where meaning what? Geographically where? So what kind of area are you looking for? Like, what is the size of what acreage are you saying is where it should have originated from? Biryani. What is biryani? If you put a potato in it, is it any more biryani or not biryani, etc. So
Yeah. What is
where
a
does it
biryani
come
versus what is a
from?
pulao?
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
a big question.
That's a big question. Where does it come from? Like, come meaning it has traveled somewhere. So what? It has as a recipe book. It traveled. The ideas traveled, or did one person? Has it traveled over time? Like, did mother teach to daughter to son to etc. And that's how it has traveled. Like, we like to ask and simplify these questions into this. Where does biryani come from? Oh, it comes from Agra or whatever in the
Yeah,
system.
like this is
Something you
mine.
want, yeah, you
Yeah.
want in that one line. But unfortunately, history is not like that. If you look at your grandparents, you had four. You go one generation above, there's eight. Yeah, and it wait, yeah. So it keeps doubling every generation. And if you go back like 20 generation, you didn't have two ancestors or one ancestor, you had thousands of ancestors. So if you
yeah,
say that, where do I come from? Which lineage do I come from? You don't come from any one, you come from a gazillion. And it's the
correct.
same with ideas. And there's this thing that apparently, I forget what the quote is, but like Mark Twain said something to this effect that, we say that, oh, steam engine was invented by X, where actually he was just the last guy to patent
Mm.
the idea or sell it or make it big. Like, there were thousands of people who came up with minor improvements and changes, and in different places where different things worked, where you had coal, okay, you needed a slightly different engine. Where you had petrol or whatever, you burned something else, where you burning wood or whatever. It's the
Yeah, yeah,
same with these ideas of biryani. Where does it come from? Can you imagine two people making exactly the same biryani? No. Everyone is gonna tinker a little bit. Oh, I don't
Yeah.
have a hurry today, chalo, let me try with this other thing. Okay. And then somebody likes that, so they start to make it that way, and somebody else doesn't like it that way. They make it so it's such a complex thing, and people want to look at it in a simplistic way, which is natural, I guess, but I think that's one of the tasks of telling history, that
Yeah.
this is not a one-liner type of thing. This is not even
So
a
I'm I
book type of thing.
Yeah.
You imagine
yeah.
all the books written on the Mughals still capture only a tiny fraction of what the Mughals are actually like. You know?
It's
Yeah.
so true. And it's like what you were saying earlier, right? Like what survives of a group of people is so minute compared to how much was produced. Like even
Mhm.
now, we don't have everything translated. We don't have access to all of the art. There's things in private collections. We have no idea what those look like. So even what
Correct.
we do have access to is limited. And so even the thing you were saying about art being commissioned by emperors for their consumption, and their ideas about it is shaping what they're seeing, is that what like a person at the bazaar was buying? Like we don't know, we don't actually. And that's one of those problems of history, right? That we so often what we have left to us is stuff that represents an elite group of people, and we don't know what was happening with people
The
lower
high
down on the
culture.
rung. Yeah, and so that to me is like there are a few glimpses here and there that you get of it, where you have a memoir written by Humayun's water carrier, or you'll have something that like Banarsi Das's Arda Kathanak, which is again like one trader's view of what happened when Akbar died. Like you get these little glimpses of what ordinary people, and even there, it's not the absolute lowest rung of society that's able to express themselves and has that expression be captured for time. It's these few people whose voices you do get to hear, and their opinions stand out. But like they're so tantalizing, because you're thinking, what if more soldiers wrote memoirs? What if more lowly servants wrote about their experiences? I want to know what they truly thought of working in this establishment. But that's where you have to imagine that,
Hmm.
as petty or as angry as we get these days, there were people getting feeling the same emotions back then as well.
And Nikhil pointed out a very interesting observation, which is where and how do cultures evolve? Because this is a question which Martin Buchner also asks in his book called Culture: A New World History, where he says no culture is, there's no culture which is true to its origins. And there's no single origin of any culture, because they all evolved around the same time, influenced each other, took good things from one thing, bad things from the other. And it's a intermingling of different kind of cultures that grew together. And when we talk of Biryan, a friend of ours who is now in Iran on a trip, he just posted, and I was just going through Facebook to check. He posted a picture from Isfahan in Iran of a dish which has naan and stuffed with some kind of a mashed thing which is called biryan
Oh,
in Iran, which is the predecessor of Indian biryani, and has naans and not rice.
wow.
It has. I think I can see
Good
some
stuff.
rice pieces, but I can send you the picture on the group that we have, that you can see that. And I think Salma Appa also mentioned that when we had her on Karwan to talk about biryani with Shagufta Siddi, and she was also talking about this kind of biryan existing even today in Iran. People don't have that rice biryani that we have in India.
Mhm.
And Neha just mentioned one thing, that it's not nihari, it's nahari. So I'm
Ari.
sorry for that. It's nahari. Nahar, as she says, is breakfast.
Mhm.
So that's a good observation. Thank you, Neha, for that clarification. So another question that you raise in the book is that is about the moving court, which is more political. They were always on the move, as you mentioned in the book. Would you
Yeah.
like to talk about that a bit? Because
Oh
we thought
yeah.
they built great palaces, great forts, they would be stationary, but that was much later.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Tell.
It's so, I mean, that of course comes a little bit from their heritage, right? There, even in Samarkand, which is this incredibly beautiful city that Babur is obsessed with,
Yeah.
the army and even Timur himself, they were camping out in gardens. They were an outdoorsy people. And in India, although they were building structures to live in, there was a strongly nomadic component to the way that they ruled, because at different points you were moving in order to be close to battle, or in order to be a show of support to a son or a governor or somebody who's engaged in subduing a rebellion, for example. But I think the person who moved around a lot for pleasure was Jahangir, who we have the most records of his courtly movements, and we have the most detailed descriptions of how he traveled. And to me, it's that is very fascinating, because it's very much like our modern glamping, where you want to go camping and you want to emulate a certain tradition of being, outdoors and under the stars or in communion with nature, but also you want the comforts of home. So you have a court where essentially you have the Padshah and hundreds and thousands of people traveling with him, including in two camps. So while he's still at one camp, you have another entire camp of people who go ahead to the next destination, set it up, and wait for him to arrive, so that he doesn't even have to go a few hours without the comforts of this camp. And I found that the organization involved, that I really want to study that a lot more, because it sounds fascinating. Like how many people were involved in the planning and execution of these city level camps, where there were streets and there were specific places where you went to for food, and specific areas in which different people were organized. So I am really interested in how that was managed, because just, like even if you're organizing a school trip with 10 kids, it's a feat of organization, right? So, or organizing a tour with a bunch of people. So how that was managed and how they did it day after day at a time when they didn't have any of the conveniences we have, it would be really, really interesting to study that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
Harvard
agree.
Business School study. Should be Harvard Business School case study.
And people, the book starts from Babur and ends with Bahadur Shah II. It's a complete history of many, many years. At least 200 plus years of a family or a dynasty that ruled India. The first might be from the outside. You can also maybe say Humayun was not from India, but from Akbar onwards, I think till you reach Bahadur Shah II, they were more Rajput than they were Mughals. If you see their their mothers, their grandmothers, and
Yeah.
you see the whole history of the family. What do you think about that? Were they Indian? Because I remember a brilliant book by Harbans Mukhya called Mughals of India.
Yeah.
He says Bharatiya Mughal. He doesn't say Mughals in India. He says Mughals of India.
You're right. Even genetically, by the time you get to a Shah Jahan, they are more Rajput than they are anything else. They are very Indian in their mannerisms. And there was a really interesting conversation I had some time ago with the folks who run Mad Mughal memes. And so we were talking about how Shah Jahan's portraits from his reign, they make him look very Persian. Like his profile, his nose, his skin tone, everything about that profile that he and you'll see he's very recognizable in his portraits. Over and over, he looks extremely Persianized. But if you look at portraits made of him in Jahangir's era, he looks like Jahangir's son. He definitely looks like any Indian middle-aged person you would see walking around Delhi. Like he's got a very recognizably Indian face. And to me, that's very interesting, because on the one, like I like that there's this sense of like, oh, I want to look more Persian. I want to distance myself from this heritage, even though Shah Jahan at his time was the most Indian Mughal emperor. He had three Rajput grandparents. So it was sort of his way of rebelling and saying, oh no, I'm not going to embrace this. I'm going to embrace this Persian heritage that's so far back in my genealogy. But yeah, they are Indian. After a certain point, they speak Indian languages, they eat Indian foods, they
Yeah.
they're part of this Indian climate. And there's this really lovely little like contrasting set of stories that I think about anytime people ask me, were they Indian, is when Babur came to India, he came with a whole bunch of begs and khans and all of these Central Asian retainers who hated the weather and couldn't wait to get back to Kabul. And he writes about how he has to really um, find ways to entice them to stay with him. And a lot of them do leave and go back to Kabul because they can't stand the heat. And then you get to Shah Jahan's period, and Shah Jahan has all these ambitions of reconquering Kandahar and getting it back from the Persian Shah. And he sends his son Murad, and he sends a Rajput army with Murad. And it's cold and it's winter. And Murad writes to his father saying, I really want to come back. It's very cold. I don't like this weather. This is not okay. And his Rajput soldiers also are men who've never seen snow. And so to them, this is horrifying weather and they want to come right back. And I love that on the one hand, you had a Mughal army that couldn't stand the heat. And then just a couple of, 150 years later, you have a Mughal army that cannot stand the cold of the mountains that are supposedly where they come from. So that sense of are they Indian or are they not, I think is answered by that pair of stories where it's like you come to belong to a place that you have lived in. And after a certain point, the Mughals are Indian. They speak the same languages. They marry into the local communities. They celebrate Diwali and Dasara. They're like the biggest festivals of the court. So to even ask that question to me is very confusing when people ask it. I'm like, oh, well, then you've got to examine what is Indian,
Correct.
When did that
Right.
phrase of being Indian, when did you have an Indian passport come into being? When you could officially say, I am Indian, here's a piece of paper that can prove it.
That's very true. Nikhil, what's your take on how do we remember Mughals today? Because there's so much going on. There's a whole narrative around the Mughals that is being, or not just Mughals actually. Even for the Indus people, they are being linked with the Rigvedic people, which is not historically proven until yet. So how do you see such kind of things happening to history?
Feel like history is being created as we are going. This is like just it just it's big. I mean, I don't know what I can say that hasn't been said already. It's just people trying to use history for modern agendas, for very much
Hmm.
present day political agendas, and on both sides. I'm not like it's not just that Hindutva side or whatever that I want to point to, but like everyone does it. What suits you is what you want to believe, and that's not that's a psychological thing that like you pick up evidence that you already have the theories in your head, you already have a belief, and then you look at evidence to suit that belief system. um Whether they were Indian or not, I don't know actually. I mean, I the thing is you can answer both. It's just up to you how you want to look at it. You want to say no, they were not Indian, you can find enough things to say they were not Indian. Okay.
Yeah.
um like for example, you might say, oh, what about their religious beliefs? Well, where does Islam come from? Yeah, okay, Islam originates in a place very far from India. But now again, does an individual human's belief, is it bound in a certain way? They could hold like so many different beliefs, and and most of us hold very contradictory beliefs also, you
Hmm.
know. So are they Indian? Are they not Indian? I don't know. This is a weird question. It's like it's a slippery slope. It's like you can believe what you want to believe about it. It's like saying, like I feel like after the second or third generation, you start to belong to that region because you can't help but be so influenced by what is going on around you that you become part of that, and you influence it. Like it's like it's like if a glass has like water, you drop like some blue color into it, and then you drop a red color. It's like, okay, so is it blue now or is it red? It's like
Hmm.
saying that it's neither. It's been changed. It has become something else, but it is itself. It's like
Yeah.
that. Like, what is Indian? At what date do you cut off and say that before this, if you were
Yeah.
present, you were Indian, and after this, you're not Indian? Or like, what is that geography that you call Indian? I mean, India
And
exists.
even that question, like you said, what is Indian? Like, if you ask different people in different parts of India, it's a very different answer to that question,
Yeah.
right? Like, I know a lot of people have this, like in Delhi, I keep getting into arguments with people where they're like, "Oh, you speak Hindi so well. Why do your people in the south hate Hindi?" And I have to keep explaining, no, nobody hates Hindi. There's no hatred for a language. It's but the idea that it is a national language is an incorrect one. We don't have anything that is a national language. So that sense that, like, there's a narrow idea of what being Indian means, and we have to impose it on everybody else, that I don't agree with. I think what being Indian is a different thing for people in different parts of the country, and how they define it is up to them. It's not, there's no one definition of what it means.
It's like that that thing. Gar Firdaus barru is Aminas to Haminas to. It's like where paradise is, it's here, it's here. It's like who is an Indian? Well, if you think you are an Indian, you are an Indian. You are an Indian. You are whatever you are. You are an Indian. It's all colors. It's all flavors.
Yeah.
It's all
Yeah,
biryani
yeah.
recipes that should
And
make.
even the thing you were saying about, yeah, Islam originated far away, but the second oldest mosque in the world exists in India, in Kerala. So, how un-Indian is it? So I don't know. That's a complicated question.
Yeah, exactly. And like wouldn't it be weird asking like, is Trump American? It's like that. Well,
I
his
think a lot of
grandparents were
Americans would want to
not.
disown him.
Yeah, but I mean, his grandparents or great grandparents or whatever were not from America. But
Mm-mm.
he's as American as it gets. So it's a little strange to me to ask these questions. But I get where people come from. I get what is going on in our society today, and I get that people have a sense of insecurity, I feel, about our history,
Yeah.
and the narratives that have been handed down to us have been a bit aggressive narratives that, oh yeah, you guys losers, always losers of history. I don't think that is true, firstly, but if that
No,
narrative is drilled in your head and you grow up believing it, then you're going to look for something else to, overcompensate for this and say, no, no, we were the greatest. And then you'll come up with
Mm.
what is we, what is great, what makes you great, and what makes you not so great. Is violence and going and killing, is that what makes you great? Or is
Mm.
it something else? So like, so I get where people are coming from and where what is this churn, but it's happening in a little weird way. And I guess that's our role as
Yeah.
right history, that I mean, it's upon us to come up with better narratives, more informed narratives, but also more empathetic narratives. And that's what we have tried with this book and with these.
Hmm. I think it's very important that we because the idea of India itself is a very modern concept according to historians. It's much the idea of a nation state is also
yeah,
very 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 modern. These ideas, these categories didn't exist when the Mughals were ruling, and as all pointed by a lot of scholars, Mughals did not use the word Mughal for them. This is something which
no,
we started using later on. And this is a very interesting aspect for us to understand these categories, these tags that we use for history or for historical personalities. It's very very important, and I think for that historical sensibility to come, we have to have books which talks from the very basics of history, which we were discussing earlier also, that a lot of books do not write from the very basic, from the word A, from that alphabet. I
Hmm.
think we need more such books like the Book of Emperors, People of the Indus, both I think published by Penguin, and I think many more. A lot of writers are now writing greatly accessible books, including historians. I should defend my profession and people working so hard to make history accessible. historians and writers, and it's not there should not be a divide between the historians and the writers. Everybody should come together to create more informed narrative, as Nikhil pointed out, and that's the need of the hour. And for that, I think if you want to understand Mughal, there are hundreds of people. But if you want to pick up one today, you can safely go with the book. And from there, you should start your journey. You should not end your journey from the book, at the book. You should start your journey of discovering Mughals from this book. If this book makes you question a lot of your beliefs about the Mughals, because it's very natural to have those beliefs, because we grew up in that setting of believing in a lot of things that we were told, but we didn't question them. So maybe this book will help you in questioning those beliefs, in uh, forcing you to read. It's a very difficult thing to do. People don't read, people don't engage. They just agree with a lot of things. So if you can see the books in all three of our backgrounds, you should make the assumption that we have read some of these books. So you also should read some of them. And this is a fantastic book to start, The Book of Emperors. I've got two copies, as you can see. One is in the background that you can see. So, two books. I can gift one if you want. If you don't want to spend money, message me. I'll send you a copy of the book. But this is a book that you should gift to the 50s, 60s WhatsApp uncles. This is a book that you should give to the Mohalle ki buas and Mohalle ki fufajis. This is a book that you should give to the younger ones who are in schools. This is a book for all ages. This is thanks to the market that we live in, the capitalist world. This book is marketed as a children's book, but this is not just a children's book. This is much more. And I think there is nothing like children's book. We always kind of, when we come, we write good literature, but when it comes to children literature, I think we just look down upon that. We think,
Yeah.
बच्चों के लिए है, थोड़ा बहुत लिख दो, ठीक है, बच्चे क्या समझते हैं, they still have long way to go, and we look down upon the kids. And that has been a trend for a very long time. At least in my childhood, we were given fairy tales by Navneet was a publisher, very and fairy tales only that was available, or Chacha Chaudhary. Those were the books. But when I got into 12th, Aparna Garodia Gupta and Roshan Dalal and others were writing great history books for children, and from there I think the trend actually picked up, and great many books started to come. So this is in that list of great books on history, which is very visual, thanks to Nikhil and his great mastery, artistry that he has shown in the book, and not just this book, but his own book also, People of the Indus, that he wrote, and also the mastery of verse written by Ashwitha. And again, this is not her first book. She also had more books. I think I have a copy of another book written by Ashwita, but that is uh, somewhere there, I think.
Oh, is it the 75
75 years wala
Incredible
book.
Indians? Yeah.
Yes, 75 Incredible Indians. Again, a puffin book, I think.
Oh, no,
So
that is HarperCollins.
that's Sorry, Colin, don't be upset. uh, 75 Incredible Indians. So that's again is a very interesting book. I have a copy of that somewhere. I won't give that copy to you people, but you should get your own from bookstores first. And if they are out of stock in the bookshops, get them online. I don't want to name the online brands. All know them. Go and buy wherever you can get. And I should not say, but there are different websites from where you can get books. I don't know. I don't know them. I won't tell you the names. Find out. There are ways that you can engage with the book. And I'm sure the publishers, the authors would also work on, you should actually work on an audiobook if it's already not there. It's an interesting
In the works.
format. Yeah, because people are now, I think there is a new trend of reading or hearing books of
Yeah,
Audible
yeah.
and other things. And it's a big trend because people, when they are moving here and there, they usually put some podcast in and they just do their workouts and other things. So thank you so much, Ashwita. Thank you so much, Nikhil, for taking out time to
Thank
do
you.
this discussion. This was, I think, it should be the first of many. This was unplanned, people. We didn't rehearse any question, totally unscripted, but we somehow pulled it off nicely. Thank you so much to all of you who were watching, who were engaging. I could not read a lot of chats, but we had a lot of chats. Somebody wanted to ask a question. What is your question, Prakash? If you send me the question, I can ask it here. Then Prakash says, in the beginning of the session, ma'am talked about we are always the product of our time, and I agree with that to an extent. But does it not take away agency of an individual in a historical context? I think this is for Ashwita.
Well, it's a good question, right? About agency, because whatever agency you exercise, you are exercising it within a particular context. And at least as far as the Mughals go, it's difficult to determine how much agency people in different social classes might have had. So that idea of agency and whether someone was able to do something or not is an interesting one to apply to the Mughals. And I think one of the areas in which I thought it was really um, surprising to consider how much agency someone had was when you think about Mughal women, which we didn't get to talk about at all today. But Mughal women were surprisingly capable and able to do things that people don't really talk about. And that's thanks to the colonial historians who made us believe that women in the harem had no power and could do nothing except sit around waiting for the emperor. So the fact that they had businesses or wrote poetry or, financed enormous building projects, all of those things need more attention. And then we can ask about how much agency did women have in the Mughal period? Did you only have agency if you were the wife of a wealthy nobleman or the emperor, or were you able to do things back then that you might not be able to do now? But yeah, that's a good question. We are I think the product of our times, but within that time we have the choice to participate in a particular movement or an ideology or not.
Or personal choices. I mean, yeah, this is not taking away the personal individual agency of people. People in history also acted from whatever their beliefs were or what they wanted to do, and etc etc, just like people do today. But you are also very heavily influenced by what's around you, and what how you think is very much influenced by how people around you think, or how your what your parents taught you, or what society accepts as good and right and moral, and what it denounces as bad and immoral. So it's both, of course. It's not one or the other.
Thank you so much. Who asked the question, Prakash, for your question. I think Gaurav asked me a question, but thank you so much, Gaurav, for your question. I think I'll do another Q&A for that. Um Neha asks about the bibliography. Neha, the bibliography is mentioned in the at the back of the book. It mentions about the primary sources. It also mentions about the secondary sources that Ashwita use, and also visual resources from which you can look at different archives, including the Victoria and Albert Museum, Chester Beatty, Christie's, Sotheby's, and a lot of other, and
I have to say, it
for
is a
those interested
limited
in very
bibliography. We weren't allowed to put everything in because there just wasn't enough space. But if anybody ever wants to ask a question about where a particular fact is from, I'm easily contactable on Instagram, and I would be happy to point you in to the right source.
Great. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining in. To follow
Thank
Nikhil,
you.
you have to go for @oddball comics on Instagram. Was the right username, Nikhil?
Yeah, oddball underscore comics.
Oddball_comics. And for Ashwita, it's Ashwita.writes.
Ashwita
No? Or,
underscore writes.
sorry, I think I missed that.
Oh, yeah, it's Ashwita underscore writes.
Okay, Ashwita_writes. So people do follow them. engage with their work. Uh, Read. That's the most important thing. Get your copies and read, and beg, borrow, steal, whatever you want to do. Thank you so much, Ashwita, Nikhil, for taking out time. Thank you so much, people, for taking out time to tune in such a large number. After a long time, I saw two-digit viewers.
Wow. Thank you,
That's a good
everyone.
thing.
Yeah, thank
That's a
you.
good thing. And thank you, everybody. As I always say, keep reading, keep thinking, keep questioning. That's how you'll keep yourself sane in these insane times. Thank you and take care.